For years, Richard Carpenter carried a silence heavier than any melody he ever composed, and the world adored the music he created with his younger sister, Karen, but few knew the storm brewing behind their polished harmonies. Karen Carpenter had a voice that could move millions, yet her life unraveled in ways that left her family shattered, and Richard watched it all from the closest seat possible, her brother, her partner, and eventually her survivor. Now looking back, he has revealed truths that once stayed locked behind closed doors, truths that reshape how we understand the Carpenter's story and the devastating end that followed. Childhood shadows and family divide shaped everything. As Karen Carpenter was born on March 2nd, 1950 in New Haven, Connecticut at Grace New Haven Hospital, while her older brother, Richard, born in 1946, had already been labeled the prodigy of the family. Richard showed perfect pitch by the time he was 4 and was composing music at 5, and their mother, Agnes, celebrated every detail of Richard's progress, documenting his lessons and praising his talent to anyone who would listen. But when it came to Karen, the attention was far different. She was often described as the child who just banged pots and pans in the kitchen, and that imbalance became the foundation of Karen's lifelong struggle for approval, especially from her mother. Their father, Harold, worked in printing, earning modest wages that barely covered the family's needs, and by 1963, he was earning about $7,200 a year, and when an opportunity arose in California, the Carpenters sold their small Connecticut home for $12,500 and bought a house in Downey for $13,500. The real motivation behind the move was Richard, as Agnes believed Los Angeles would give her son the chance to fulfill his destiny in music, and in letters to relatives, she wrote about Richard's bright future, but barely mentioned Karen at all. Karen, only 13 when the family relocated, struggled to adjust as she spoke with an East Coast accent that set her apart at Downey High School, and she was shy, awkward, and often felt like she didn't belong. But then came the turning point. During a music class, she tried the glockenspiel, but when the drummer of the school band quit, Karen asked to step in, and within minutes, the conductor realized she had a natural gift for rhythm. She mastered patterns in weeks that took others months, and by the end of that year, she was already playing complex pieces like Caravan and Malagina. Yet despite her obvious talent, her mother remained unmoved. Richard was given a $750 Baldwin piano and private lessons, while Karen practiced on borrowed drums, never receiving financial support for her music. And in her high school diary, she wrote the heartbreaking line, "Mom thinks Richard is Mozart, and I'm just noise." Richard, however, saw something very different as he recognized her rhythm as extraordinary, and in time, her voice would prove even more remarkable. The rise of the Carpenters followed, and in 1965, Richard Carpenter, 19, was arranging jazz while his 15-year-old sister Karen impressed behind the drums, and with bassist Wes Jacobs, they formed the Richard Carpenter Trio and won the 1966 Hollywood Bowl Battle of the Bands with Richard's piece Ice-T. RCA gave them studio time, but their jazz sound clashed with the rock era and the group fell apart, and everything changed when Karen casually sang "I'll Be Seeing You," as Richard realized her voice was extraordinary, even if she still thought of herself as a drummer who happens to sing. By 1967, they formed Spectrum, focusing on harmonies, though record labels dismissed them as too soft, but still, Richard built arrangements around Karen's contralto, convinced it was their path forward. In 1969, a demo of their slowed, emotional version of Ticket to Ride reached Herb Alpert at A&M Records, and captivated, he signed them on April 22nd, while Karen, only 19, needed her parents to co-sign the contract. Their debut album, Offering, later Ticket to Ride, wasn't a major hit, but showcased Karen's drumming, vocals, and even bass playing, and the world was beginning to hear the voice that would soon define a generation. Worldwide fame and the pressure of perfection soon followed, as the turning point came on July 25th, 1970, when the Carpenters released They Long to Be Close to You. And within weeks, it soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying there for 4 consecutive weeks. The siblings, once struggling to find a label, were suddenly household names, and the album Close to You followed, reaching #2 in the United States and #1 in Canada. Karen was just 20 years old, and her voice was now one of the most recognizable in America. And only months later, they released We've Only Just Begun, a song originally written for a bank commercial by Paul Williams and Roger Nichols. Richard heard potential and persuaded Williams to expand it, and released in August 1970. The song reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and spent 7 weeks at #1 on the adult contemporary chart, as couples across America began using it as their wedding song, and its hopeful lyrics became a cultural anthem. In just 1 year, the Carpenters had achieved what most musicians could only dream of: multiple hit singles, sold-out concerts, and Grammy Awards, including Best New Artist in 1971. Yet behind the success, the cracks were already forming. Karen was naturally shy and preferred the security of her drum kit. And on stage, hidden behind her Ludwig set, she felt safe, but audiences wanted to see her face, and critics complained there was no focal point during concerts, and management pushed her to step out from behind the drums. By 1972, her appearances at the kit were limited to short showcases, while most of the show required her to stand at the microphone, exposed and anxious. And she admitted in interviews, "I consider myself a drummer who sings," but even that identity was being taken from her. The fame also intensified family tensions, as though Karen's voice had become the centerpiece of their success. Her mother, Agnes, continued to favor Richard, and she publicly praised his genius as arranger and composer, while brushing aside Karen's achievements. Richard's perfectionism also weighed heavily, as he chose the songs, crafted every arrangement, and enforced a relentless schedule. And in 1973 alone, the Carpenters played 174 concerts, recorded a full album, and appeared on multiple television specials. Karen, exhausted, felt powerless, reduced to the image of the sweet-voiced frontwoman rather than a full artist. The illness deepens, and the solo dream emerged. And by the mid-1970s, Karen's health had become impossible to ignore at live performances, as her frail appearance often drew audible gasps from the audience. In 1975, the Carpenters abruptly canceled their European tour, and officially, the reason was exhaustion, but those close to the group knew the truth, as Karen was too weak to perform, and at just 91 pounds, she could barely stand through a set. Newspapers speculated about cancer or other illnesses, but almost no one recognized the signs of anorexia nervosa, as it was a disorder that remained virtually unspoken, hidden behind shame and misunderstanding. Still, the praise for her talent never stopped, and in 1975, Playboy magazine held its annual music poll, and to everyone's surprise, Karen was voted the 10th best drummer in the world, ranking even higher than John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. Bonham, reportedly furious at the comparison, mocked the result. But for female musicians, it was a landmark moment, as a woman who had been pushed away from her drums was still recognized among the best in a male-dominated field. Karen herself downplayed it, joking, "I hope he's not too upset. I love Led Zeppelin." Yet privately, the poll only reminded her of what she had lost, the freedom to play the instrument she loved most. Behind closed doors, the family dynamic only deepened her pain, and when she finally sought professional help in the early 1980s, therapist Stephen Levenkron invited her parents to join a session. Richard was able to tell Karen he loved her, but when it came to Agnes, the approval Karen had craved her whole life, her mother could not say the words, not even in therapy, not even when her daughter was clearly dying, and Richard later admitted that moment haunted him because he saw how much Karen needed to hear it. Amid the personal struggles, Karen longed for independence, and in 1979, with Richard in rehab for his addiction to Quaaludes, she seized the opportunity to pursue a solo album. She traveled to New York and began recording with producer Phil Rayon, known for his work with Paul Simon and Billy Joel, and the sessions were electric as Karen experimented with disco ballads and jazz-infused tracks, and she sang sultry lyrics that showed a more mature side of her artistry. Paul Simon was so impressed with her rendition of Still Crazy after all these years that he altered a lyric for her version. And for the first time, Karen was shaping her own music without Richard's control. Friends who heard the finished album were stunned, as they said it was the most confident, versatile work she had ever done, and Karen herself was overjoyed as she even considered moving to New York to start fresh, away from the suffocating family dynamics in Downey. But when she played the album for Richard and executives at A&M Records in early 1980, the reaction devastated her, as Richard, just out of rehab, saw the project as a betrayal, and Herb Alpert called the album unreleasable. Despite praise from industry insiders, the label shelved it, and Karen was charged $400,000 to cover the recording costs deducted from future Carpenter's royalties. A marriage of lies, and the final spiral followed. And just as her solo dream was collapsing, Karen believed she had finally found love. In June 1980, she met Thomas James Burrows, a real estate developer 9 years older than her. And charming and polished, he seemed to be the stability she longed for. Within 2 months, they were engaged, shocking even her closest friends, as Karen had always dreamed of marriage and children, and she convinced herself that Burrows could give her the life she craved outside the stage lights. The wedding was set for August 31st, 1980 at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and on the surface, it was a fairy tale, but days before the ceremony, Karen discovered a devastating truth. Burrows had undergone a vasectomy years earlier and had no intention of reversing it, and for Karen, who desperately wanted children, the news was crushing. She turned to her mother for support, but Agnes was unmoved, as the invitations had been sent, the hotel was booked, and the family reputation was at stake. "You made your bed. Lie in it," she reportedly told her daughter, and with no one to stand beside her,